thinking about how different it is now with the media, right? In the old days, people interviews, they'd have makeup studios and scripts and these camera teams and everything like that, and then now we just like show up
now.
Sit there and talk for 3 hours, like no script, no nothing, just like phones and
in this little nook of this place that we happened to it was funny because we were at Hotel de Vin, which is just right on the water in St Andrews. And it was beautiful, and it was one of those things where the shoot actually got moved from Edinburgh, as you know, to St Andrews, and I'm thinking, okay, that's probably not going to work now, but you're like, well, I'm only 11 miles away from St Andrews. And so we look at the hotel, and I'm like, oh, it's beautiful, like this is great. And then Nat booked the accommodation for the same dates in October, not September. So then I'm like, okay, what have we got? And then she books this place, and she goes, oh, I didn't even think about like it looking good and whatever. I'm like, it's fine. Well, everything else seems to be working itself out. And then I rocked up, and I'm like, well, this is gonna work. This is perfect.
Little nook.
Yeah, I just actually finished your book.
Oh yeah.
About 5 minutes ago.
All right.
Because it was like, and again, it was one of those things where it was like every moment of time that I had to like, I guess, dedicate my attention toward it. It was like increment. And then I just had the 33-minute drive back from dropping off my daughter. And it was unreal. So, as I said, there's just so many directions that I want to go with it, but let me just double check that I'm recording. Yeah, it's a rogue setup, real rogue.
All right. So we roll.
I guess I'd like to start. As you know, I spoke to Mark Gober, who has, I think even in our interview, he referenced your work being an influence on his understanding of logical fallacies. And so I guess I wanted to start at your astrophysics. And so you studied astrophysics, and you're a PhD in theoretical physics. Is that right?
Theoretical nuclear physics.
Theoretical nuclear physics.
Yeah.
And then you got to a stage where, I mean, how many years was it in that you kind of felt that it was a fool's errand? Would that be right?
No, I mean, certainly during the years in academia, I was all in with it, and you don't really have time to test what you're being taught, because you're always got to get on to the next thing. There's always the pressure. Like I say, you're on basically a train track. You're in academia, onto the next course, on the next thing, the next exam, and so on. But some things were strange. Like I remember being aware that in astrophysics, for example, so all the numbers that they give you, like the distance to the moon, the diameter of the moon, the diameter of the sun, the distance to Saturn, the distance to all these like huge numbers that are these astrophysical numbers. I remember noticing that there was no way to derive them, no way to measure them, and no way to verify them, right? They were just given to us as in they've been worked out by higher authorities, and this is just what they are. But one of the things I loved about physics was the ability to start with assumptions and principles and actually derive information. But when it came to astrophysics, you couldn't do that. So things like the mass of the moon, say, or the mass of Saturn, they throw these figures around, or the distance to this galaxy and everything. They throw these around as if they're certain numbers, but there was no actual way to calculate them, measure them, or verify them, right? They've been given to us by higher authorities in the space world or whatever, NASA, let's say. So I remember thinking that was a bit strange, but I didn't really have much of a sense of the scale of the conspiracy at that time. But so I switched, during my master's, I switched to theoretical physics. So I did astrophysics for the first 2 years, and then I got into quantum physics. So when they say theoretical physics, it's largely quantum physics. So I found that to be very interesting, because a lot of it sort of defies conventional logic. It's very exotic. The mathematics is very, exciting. It uses all the most state-of-the-art mathematics and stuff. So I got into that, and then I just wanted to continue my studies after my master's, and so I was looking for PhDs to basically just continue, and this nuclear physics opportunity came up. So nuclear physics is quantum physics. but it's like applied to the problem of the atomic nucleus. So you're using the mathematics of quantum physics, but you're modeling atoms and nuclei, essentially, is what I was doing. So writing computer code to simulate nuclear reactions and things like this. And so I just saw it as an opportunity to continue deeper study of quantum physics. And I did it. It took me 4 years. It was meant to be 3, but it took me an extra year to finish it all off. And then, of course, when I then graduated, I was pretty fed up of it by then. I was just like, because I was broke, I had all this debt, and I just wanted to get a job and start earning money like my friends were. And it took me 6 months to find a job after that PhD, and I had repeated discussions with recruitment agencies and job interviewers and stuff about just my lack of skills, right? And how all this all this physics was like no use to anybody, right? And I was surprised because I thought this was like the future. I thought this was, I thought this would be valuable knowledge to have for employers, but it wasn't really. So, I ended up getting a job as a technical consultant in an IT consultancy company, doing nothing whatsoever to do with any of the physics I'd done. I was basically just testing smart cards, payment cards,
yep.
Contactless payment cards. That was essentially what I was doing most of the time. So yeah, I mean, it was years after before I started to revisit with kind of more of an awakened, mature mind, start to look at what I'd been taught, and I started to find a lot of red flags. Just a lot of problems, things not making sense, not really seeing anywhere in the world where this knowledge was being used effectively. In academia, it seems so important, and everyone's talking about it and bigging it up, and there's people studying, and they get funding to look into it, and all this kind of stuff. But when you leave academia, where's the fruits? What are they actually making? What are they building? What problems are they solving with these theories? And I could find nothing at all. So this, it's been a long journey, like revisiting all the science that I've been taught. But it got to a point where it became so clear that I just had to write a book about it. I knew I had to get it down and just put it all out there for people to make up their own mind.
It's when you talk about the mass of the moon, the mass of the sun, the distances, all those sorts of things, it's easy for me to understand the way in which the layperson can just accept what's given to them, because it's almost like an unconscious overwhelm. You go, whatever.
Yeah. It's so big.
You must know. I'm not even going to bother going down there, because there's this perception of, it's almost like, well, the distance of the moon it's almost as far as you need to travel to even understand how to get to that equation, Yeah. But the thing that I find is a bottleneck, I think, within the collective awareness as well as my own, is that it's easy for them to bamboozle them, but how is it that if the astrophysics or quantum physics and all the larger modalities, if they have such a baseless foundation, not grounded in verifiable reality, how are they also able to fool the people who are working so closely in that field, studying that field, literally looking at it up close? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I have this tower structure in the book, right, based on the Tower of Babel. So it's assumptions built on top of assumptions, and so we're indoctrinated from a very young age with the globe, for example, and atoms, right? We live on a spinning globe and everything's made from atoms. It goes far, I don't even remember life before that, right? That was it's one of the earliest things we learn. And everything is based on that assumption. It goes completely unquestioned. They're like sacred cows, right, that you're not allowed to question. And certainly during my whole university years, I never thought to question that at all. It wasn't until 2016 I started looking at the globe skepticism stuff, the flat earth content and everything. And that was 2016, that's like 11 years after my PhD. But what struck me about that when I started looking into it was that I didn't know any of it. Like all this stuff that so-called flat earthers were doing, all the testing and the measurements, the long distance observations, questioning all these different theories and stuff. I wasn't aware of any of it. And I'd spent 10 years in physics, you know, and did not know about any of this, never even thought to question any of this stuff. So it really struck me that these flat earthers were, you know, very meticulous and further down the line of study, of actually studying what this realm is, than I was, even though I'd given 10 years of my life to that very cause, you know, trying to figure out what this realm is like. You know, there's just, so I was around 2016, I started to like grasp that I wasn't living on a giant spinning ball, and that outer space maybe not be millions and millions of light years away, but actually all the stars may be much closer. In fact, I think they're all the same distance. You know, it's like I think that they're all the same distance away, and it's not too far. But of course, I used to think every star was a different distance, and we were in this big open void. So yeah, looking into all that, it all just started to like come closer. The stationary aspect of Earth as well, I could not justify believing that I'm spinning round anymore. It just, there's no evidence of that, and it's you know, spinning is a very extreme state to be in, and it should be measurable as well, but you know, it isn't. So a lot of that started to happen around 2016, but I didn't talk about it publicly. Right, I was like, I could not bring myself. I thought this would be the end of me, you know, if I talk about this publicly. But I kept looking, you know, I just kept looking for proof, and I just kept finding more and more reasons to doubt the official physics. And it wasn't until, you know, it was like 8 years later before I actually came out, you know, because I spent 8 years like checking to make sure I wasn't getting duped and that I hadn't been misled and everything, but it was just more and more reasons.
But it's a really good point, because when I feel myself question something, I look at it and I go, there are so many holes, potential holes in what it is that I'm intuitively kind of, I guess, touching there, that the idea of coming out and speaking about something prior to you having all your checks and balances in place is terrifying, because it's, you know, tribalism's a real thing, you know, within our DNA or whatever it may be. What was do you remember what the straw that broke the camel's back was when you went, oh God, we're not on a spinning ball?
Not really. I mean, one of the first things I watched was that 200 Proofs. 200 Proofs by Eric Dubay.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so it's, you know, it's quite a long-winded thing. He goes through them very fast, like 200 individual reasons why we don't live on a spinning ball. But he was based on a book called 100 Proofs, Earth is Not a Spinning Ball, from like 100 years earlier. I think it was like 1880s or something it was written. So he'd essentially taken that book, went through all the proofs and added in like 100 more. And he makes the point at the beginning that it could have been 300, it could have been 400. There's just so many ways to like show it. But anyway, that was one of the first things I watched, and I watched it a bunch of times. I was watching a lot of it, so I was taking in a lot of different reasons. But I was in Hawaii at the time, so I lived in Hawaii for 2.5 years now.
Which I want to get to, by the way. You teaching an alchemical way to make music, right?
Audio alchemy, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it was a weird one in Hawaii, because if you get the globe on Google Earth and you spin it round to Hawaii, you know, Hawaii and New Zealand are almost in an entire hemisphere by themselves, right? You can turn the globe into such a position that it's entirely ocean, but with New Zealand here and Hawaii there. So that means the whole rest of the world, every other country except for Hawaii and New Zealand, are on the other half. Right. The ball.
Yeah.
And that's really weird. I couldn't really like deal with that, you know, like that I was in such a remote place that had an entire hemisphere of the world just for Hawaii and New Zealand. And you never see that angle of the Earth from satellite images and stuff, right? But there it was, like right there in Google Earth. And you know, just starting to think about, like, because if we were on a ball, then what that means is that everything else in the world is beneath you. everything, not just the Australians, right? But every other country is beneath you because you're on the top of the ball. Wherever you are, you're on the top of the ball. Everything else is down and away.
Yeah.
And honestly, like that became harder to process. Like the idea that we're all just, up is different for everybody, right? Because you're all had a different angle on the ball. So up is different for you than it is for me and stuff. But one of the founding principles of alchemy is as above, so below, right? It's this idea that there's an above and a below. And in a flat plane reality, above is the same for everybody, below is the same for everybody. But in the ball, everyone's got a different above, a different below. They're all facing a different direction, different orientation. And it just, just from looking at the evidence, like the ball just started to seem less and less likely and more ridiculous. Not to mention the idea of how the ocean can actually stick to the ball when it's spinning. That's another aspect.
That the as above, so below thing. This is a point that I wanted to. A big question that I had for you was when you're looking at alchemy, when you're discussing alchemy, there's this very, I guess, materialistic idea. Not when you're looking at it. I'm rearranging my statement, my question. There's a very materialistic idea when it comes to the concept of alchemy that it's turning lead to gold, base metals into high metals. So when you're looking at alchemy, when you're speaking about alchemy, are you speaking about the literal is not quite the right word, but the physical transmutation of material into other material, or are you speaking about the subtler, more refined energies of reality and the transmutation of those? Because that's kind of like the leap that people, you either sit on one side or the other. Do you find that?
Yeah. So the lead into gold thing is symbolic. Now I do believe it is possible, but because that's not really what the alchemists cared about. There's a saying, our gold is not the vulgar gold. I think it was Paracelsus that said that. I might be wrong, but it's a famous alchemical saying. And what it means is that the gold that alchemists are talking about is not the gold that people want to get rich from, right? It's like gold is symbolic of perfection, right? So it's related to the sun. Gold is said to be the metal corresponding to the sun. And the sun is the most perfected of the luminaries. And so gold is the most perfected of the metals. But lead is a base metal. It doesn't have luster, right? It's not shiny. It doesn't have a beautiful color. It's not very conductive. All the kind of qualities that you want from a good metal are not present in lead. So lead is said to be like the lowest state. But this transmutation it also applies to like making art. So starting with just, a canvas and some paints, let's say, right? You've got basically just some materials, raw materials. And then through the process of painting, you create this like priceless work of art, let's say. Or making music, right? You start with just whatever, a bunch of pots and pans and a microphone. Before you know it, you've got a hit song, right? Just through working through a series of processes. Now, things like art are actually more valuable than gold, right? Because they have a similarity to gold in that they shine, they have this luster to them. And they're kind of incorruptible in a way. Like music, once it's recorded and distributed, that's it. You can't really, it's there, it's like a public record. But then the other aspect of the transmutation is personal development. So a lot of the time when they're talking about turning lead into gold, they mean talking about a leaden man, right? Someone who's maybe broken, in need of healing, needs personal work. It's like transforming into gold to a wise man, right? Or like from the fool to the wise man is also led into gold. You see, it's symbolic of all kinds of transformation. But the people who oppose alchemy try to make it out like it's all just about getting rich quick. Right? But as they say, our gold is not the vulgar gold. That was not the whole point. But there were alchemists who did want to just get rich quick, and they were called puffers, right? Because they would just puff, they would put the lead in the pot, and then they just puff it as hard as they can get it to try and turn it into gold, right? But they would never actually make anything beautiful, you know, they'd never read any books, they'd never build anything, they never heal anyone. All they do is just puff hot air to try and make gold and puff themselves up, you know. So yeah, there's a whole lore about that. Yeah, so there were these like fake alchemists who didn't really understand the true alchemy and were just trying to make money to get rich, versus those who were doing the personal work and making artworks and so on.
And so when it comes to utilizing the 4 elements within the creation process, when you went into this part in your book, I've got my family, like my grandfather was like a rock musician, like in his own right. My uncle's a musician. Jai, my brother's got this musical flair, and there's something there in it for me, but it's never really, like I draw and do other sorts of visual arts, but music has never really made a great deal of sense to me. So I kind of go, that's for later. But when you were describing the way in which the different aspects of creating a song correlate and correspond to the different elements, it's never made more sense to me in my life. So can you go through a little bit?
Yeah, good to hear that. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can look at the elements in music, which, you know, I broke down based on their frequency, essentially. So like rhythm is the slowest frequency in the music, what you call the BPM, right? It's like the pace of the music. That's the slowest frequency, and that corresponds with earth. And it's a very earthy, you know, rhythm is very earthy, right? You're hitting like pots and pans and leather skins and all that kind of stuff with the drums and everything. It's also the slowest frequency. So then you have bass, which kind of, you know, bass flows between the rhythm, kind of like gels it all together. And bass corresponds with water, because it's actually emotion. Water is, the waters of the body is the emotions of the body. And bass creates emotion by moving the liquids in the body. And if you take the bass out of music, it loses its emotional quality completely. You know, you're not going to be moved to tears by music that has no bass frequencies in it. It's just not even possible, right? It just sounds too tinny. You just kind of do your head in. But when that bass frequency is in there, it moves you to emotion. Of course, you have harmony as well, harmony is when you sing on top of the bass. So harmony is like following the bass with higher notes. And again, this is very emotional, right? Harmonies produce like big emotional feelings in the body. So then we've got the air of the music. So air corresponds with the mental and communication, because air is the medium of communication. And of course, a big part of music is communication, where we have lyrics. And in music where there isn't lyrics, there's usually a lead instrument which is kind of filling the role of the human voice, you know, whether it's the lead guitar or the saxophone or something. And the melodies actually come from how we talk. You know, if you listen to the pitch of my voice, it goes up, it goes down. You know, this is kind of melody is a reflection of how we talk and communicate. So the melodic aspect corresponds with the air element. And then the fire element, well, the fire element is really the dynamics, the timbre of the music, right? So like how hot it is. We use those terms hot and cold in music, or dry and wet. You know, and so like when something's hot, it's very fiery. It's got lots of harmonics. It's loud, and it's very dynamic. So I just broke them down that way. You know, you can go in depth with those a lot more. But then you have other aspects to it, like the planets and the chakras. You know, you have the 7 planets and the 7 chakras. Things like Venus and Mars. So Venus and Mars have their own correspondence. Venus is the goddess of beauty and love and, you know, procreation and this kind of thing.
And watery, right?
Yeah. And Mars is the god of war, is like destructive and so on.
Fire.
Yeah. And so I noticed, like in films, films always tend to have a bit of war, a bit of action, and a bit of romance. And you listen how different the music is for the action scene versus the romance scene, right? The action scenes will have like pounding drums, you know, like pounding drums and bass, like, which is like the Martian or marching music, like martial music. And then when you have the romantic scenes, it'll be all like soft and like long strings and long notes and uplifting and emotional and things like that. Maybe make you cry or something, you know. So you have the different planetary influences have different music within them, you know, and Venus and Mars is like a good example. It's like the masculine and the feminine. Then you have things like Mercury, which is all about communication in the mind. So music that's maybe more technical or electronic or like techno and things like that, you know, maybe more like Mercury. But you can mix all these things together in your composition. But that's kind of how I started to break it down, you know, in terms of the 7 luminaries, the 4 elements, and the 3 principles, like body, soul, and spirit. So, you know, all music has a body, soul, and spirit as well. Like if you take sheet music, for example, you know, how we used to buy music on a piece of paper with, you know, the melody and the bass, right? We just have the melody and the bass, the right hand and the left hand for the piano, but they wouldn't have drums in there. It wouldn't have, you know, effects or anything like that. It's literally just the melody and the bass, because that is the soul of the song. That's the absolute, you know, bare minimum you need to identify the song, is you need to know the notes of the melody and the notes of the bass. But there's all these different ways you can express it. You know, you could make it with drums, without drums, with lyrics, without lyrics. You can make it fast, you can make it slow, you could do it in minor, you can do it in major. You have essentially infinite creative freedom as to how to express the song, but the core soul of the song is the melody and the bass. That's what kind of gives it its identity, you know. So yeah, I just, when I started looking at alchemy originally, I mean, it reads like it's talking about chemistry, but as a music producer, I was like, I mean, all this applies to music production as well. And actually, music production is very, you know, music studio is very similar to a chemistry lab, right? You have all these devices, you know, which they all take inputs and outputs, right? So you're putting energy in, you're then manipulating that energy, changing it, purifying it. Usually, you might be purifying, you might be making it dirtier, less pure, like with distortion and things like this. But you're always taking energy in, changing it, and putting it out. And you have all these machines playing a different role. And I started to see, well, this is just like chemistry, but it's like sonic chemistry. And so I came up with this term, audio alchemy, which was about, you know, making music in an alchemical way, so as to help us understand alchemy while we're also making music.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time, because I was an actor for 16 years. I don't know whether we didn't get to speak much at Living Free, but
briefly. Were you in anything that I know?
I did Neighbours and Home and Away.
You were in Neighbours and Home and Away?
Yeah.
I used to watch those like when I was a kid. They were on at 5:30 every day during the week. So it was always after you had your dinner, you know, you just sit down and watch Neighbours and Home and Away.
So those were the two most, I guess, notable things that I had done. But in pursuing that craft, and I also studied Hermetics, I started to look at every aspect of my personality. And within the Franz Barden text, which we spoke about briefly, there's the black and white soul mirror. And you're able to, when you observe all of your personality traits, there's some guidance there, but you somewhat intuitively feel what element that personality trait, that expression, from where it originates, what element it originates in. And it really just takes contemplation and looking at the law of correspondence and going, clearly anger, sharpness, electric, fire, there's clear correlation between those two. There's somewhere you kind of go, I'm not really sure, it could be earth, could be water, whether it's the negative body of the elements, or the negative aspects of the elements, or rather, the magnetic decompositional side of the elements versus the fire and air. When you start to view things in that way and you start to open the lens out and just go, where might that sit? Where might that correspond? What you're saying makes perfect sense, because everything within creation seems to have an origin, the as above, so below. Everything mirrors everything. And where was I going with that?
Well, I could jump in with something there.
Please,
if you want.
please.
Yeah, so Paracelsus said that all substances contain the four elements in varying proportions, right? So, so the four elements, we can, on one level, we can think of them as substances like earth, water, air, quite obvious. But even within those substances, there is qualities, the earth qualities, air qualities, water qualities.
Yeah.
And one of the things I realized recently about this that helps explain this is if you take wood, for example, wood doesn't melt. Right? You can't melt it, right? It's like if a dried bit of wood or whatever, if you try to melt it, it will just disintegrate. But if you take any metal, it will melt. You give it enough heat, it will turn to a liquid. And then you can pour that metal into a mold and it will take the shape of its container. And that's a principle of water. Now, you cannot do that with wood. And this is because wood, in its dried form, certainly, has no water in its elemental constitution. It has earth, of course. It has air because there's like holes and stuff in it. And it has fire because it's fuel. It's combustible, right? It can be turned into fire. But metal will turn to liquid when you heat it. And it's because metal has water in its constitution as well as fire, earth, and air. And so we're similar. It's like we have all four elements within us in varying proportions in our soul. Like in the signature of our soul, we'll have a certain amount of fire, a certain amount of air, a certain amount of water and earth. And like you say, each of the elements also have two polarities. They have a creative and a destructive. So fire, of course, we need the light for life, but it can also burn us and destroy us. Water, we need to drink it. We're made from water, but it can drown us. It can, send a tsunami and wipe us all out. And the same with earth and air, right? They're vital for life, but they also have a flip side where they can just completely destroy you. So we have that polarity within us. This is why as human beings, we're often full of contradictions. We're not completely aligned with everything because we have these different elements, these different balance of things, and we may have one view which is contradictory to another because we have this constitution within us that we may not have fully understood or fully aligned with. So I think it's the same with like the chakras as well, right? The chakras it's not like a fire chakra, an air chakra, an earth chakra, right? It's like each chakra has a proportion of the four elements within it, and that may be different from one person to another.
I think where I was going before was, which thank you, you brought it back to me, was for anybody listening to this, if it doesn't make sense, it's contemplating the nature of, let's say, if because we're very, I guess, physiologically centric in a lot of our awarenesses at this particular stage. Looking at the quality of air, like what is it? Open, spaciousness, expansive, transparent.
Yeah.
Fire, heat. If you look at just the way that the physical element presents itself, you'll see that there are corresponding effects in almost allegorical ways that make sense of a system like what you're speaking of.
Yes. Yeah, so glass, for example, right, we have here glass was known as frozen air, right, because it's transparent. It looks it looks virtually identical to air, but it's solid. It's a solid barrier. And it's also liquid, but it's a very, very viscous liquid, right? You can heat it, turn it liquid, but it's super creakly. So it's only got a very low amount of water in glass, but it's got a high proportion of air because it looks just like air, has all the qualities of air, but also has earth because it's solid and brittle. Right? It'll break and crack easily. Whereas if it had more water in it, it would be more bendy and flexible, like a branch on a tree, right? If the wood is connected to the tree, it's bendy and flexible because it has water going through it. But once it's cut off and it's dead wood, it has no water left in it. It's now completely brittle and it can't be, bent or whatever. So, because that fluidity and bendiness is a watery attribute. So, Yeah, so they're not just substances, they're qualities, and they're inherent in everything. Yeah.
I want to go back to, what did you call it? You called it scientism? Was it
Scientism, yeah.
Yeah.
So this was the literal...
5 elements of scientism.
Yeah. Yeah, so scientism, I didn't coin the term, but it was a term that just came up for like the literal belief in scientific theories, where people have, essentially abandoned all religion, all spirituality, and have just adopted belief in scientific theories as a replacement. And it's true, I was there, I abandoned all that stuff. I say I abandoned it, I mean, I wasn't brought up particularly religious. My parents are kind of atheists or agnostic. So, I came from that background. But, it's also known as materialism, right? Which is, materialism is defined as one who does not believe in spiritual substances, right? It's the idea that there's nothing spiritual existing at all. There's only the material that we can see and feel and hold with our hands. So scientism is really based on materialism. And the atom is the theory of matter, the theory of what matter consists of, how it came about, what it's made of at its most fundamental level. So I came to realize that the actual atomism, as it's called, the belief in atoms, is the foundation of all the scientific materialist theories. So the whole of scientism is based on atomism, and I'd actually never seen anyone question atoms before I did. So obviously with Flat Earth there was hundreds of people, thousands of channels and everything questioning it and doing all that research. So I never really had anything new to say about Flat Earth. Honestly, I'm like I get it, but my background was in atomic physics, and I thought I could look at that, and then I started to wonder, is there any evidence that atoms exist? Just like with the virus, right? So I'd been through all this with viruses already, looking for proof that viruses existed or that they'd been isolated, and I couldn't find it. And I thought, well, what about atoms then? Because atoms are about 1 million times smaller than a virus, right? So if they can't isolate a virus, can they isolate something 1 million times smaller? And then the particles are said to be like 1 million times smaller than the atoms. And then now they say that the neutrons and protons are made of even smaller particles like quarks and everything. And you're just getting down to like such tiny scales of magnitude that it's way beyond the realm of human senses or even for technology to reach. And I just realized everything I'd ever learned about atoms and nuclei was theoretical. And I looked into the experiments that we were told that proved that these things existed, and they just fell apart. They just didn't stand up to scrutiny at all. And no one was scrutinizing them in physics class as well, right? We were all just sitting there being told, this is how it is. This guy, Rutherford, did this experiment and proved that the nucleus existed, yada, yada. And that's it. No one's done the experiment since. Never needs to be checked, never needs to be questioned. One guy did it one time, and now we believe all this. We rest our assumptions on that. I started looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, it's not, that's not sufficient. Like the Cavendish experiment that supposedly proved gravity. It's like, 300 years ago or something, this like massive contraption that's like nearly impossible to reproduce. It's like notoriously difficult, ultra sensitive equipment that could, tell you anything. And then we're supposed to now believe gravity is real based on this one experiment that one guy did a long time ago. It's that kind of thing, it's like we're not seeing that they're making these claims based on these one experiments from a long time ago, and then we're not seeing them being repeated and improved upon and built upon. We're just building all our ideas and assumptions on that one experiment.
So I'm wondering where those things fall apart in your mind, because again, I was chatting to Mark Gober, and he was talking about the logical fallacy of a virus. If it's not isolated, we can't hold it, we can't observe it, we can't hold it in the hand. So it would be silly to just assume that it exists and understand that there's a whole bunch of variables in place. We don't have all the variables in place, so how can we possibly assert that that's 100% what's taking place? But egregores, for example, you can't hold an egregore in the hand, but you can see the effect. Like when COVID happened, right? I was in myself, Nat, and my wife and one of our friends all got really ill. And it was probably the worst flu I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And so when I look at that, I go, we may not be able to hold that in the hand or observe it, but I'm experiencing a very significant effect.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile those two in your mind? Is it just nothing? And I know you spoke about, this is kind of where I'm leading because I'm interested in the psychogenic illness.
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little bit for us?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I got really sick in 2020 as well, for about 3 weeks, and it was intense. But I was at the same time, I was like dealing with the whole mental pressure of what was going on at that time, and it wasn't so unusual for me to get sick because I probably got sick every year previous as well with a similar, flu-like symptom every year or two maybe. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, I was looking really for proof of contagion, right? So this was the thing that was being sold on, was the idea that it was this creature or particle. Originally it was a creature, but then they started saying it wasn't alive. But then I looked it up, it was supposed to be 5 million atoms in a cluster. So you imagine that. But so this creature is causing the sickness by attacking us on some level, attacking our cells. But not only that, it's being transmitted through the air as a particle and then reproducing itself in other people and stuff. So really that's what needs to be proven, Now, if you want an alternative explanation as to how people get sick at the same time, I go with sympathetic resonance. So the easiest example is the yawning, right? When you see somebody yawn and you yawn as well. Now, in that case, like, it doesn't always happen, right? If you're like pumped, you've just had a coffee, you got up in the morning and you see somebody yawn, you may not necessarily catch that yawn. But if you're tired and they're tired, there's a sympathy, right? Because you're both in a similar state of being, you're both tired. So you see someone yawn and then you yawn as well, right? Now, there's not a transmission of a physical particle between you, but the information, the signal that you received, you got a signal from them that they yawned, and then you responded with a sympathetic response. And they show this with tuning forks. So you have a tuning fork, they're both the same. You strike one, bing, and then the other one starts vibrating. But if one's even slightly shorter than this one and you do it, it doesn't do it at all, right? They have to be the same length. In other words, they have to be the same state in order to be sympathetic to each other. If it's a little bit shorter or a little bit longer, it won't resonate.
So it can be on the same resonance, but or is that different resonance because it's shorter?
No, if it's shorter, it's a different pitch and it won't resonate.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, like if one of them's like 432 and one of them's 440, there won't be no resonance. They have to be the same length, the same frequency in order to sympathize. And alchemists would talk about sympathy a lot. They believed it was a real force of nature. So more generally, it's just like if any two objects or two beings have a similar internal state, then they will find sympathy with each other. And similarly, if two beings have a totally different state, right, they won't sympathize with each other. They'll be kind of against each other even. So, and then in terms of like why we undergo these purification processes, the flu, the cold, or whatever you want to call it, I mean, it's all elimination. It's elimination and resting. You're basically forced to rest. You can't keep going with your work. You get too fatigued, and then you're sweating, you're having fevers, your nose is running, you're coughing up stuff, you're having, diarrhea, let's say, it's all elimination. So I see it as a detoxification process. It's like all the stuff that's gunked up in your body is being cleaned out. And it's being managed by some kind of bodily intelligence, because we're not deciding, we're not just, I'm going to get the flu now, right? It's like it just happens when it seems the body thinks it's the right time, and then the body may get that signal from other people around. So your wife gets sick, you get sick, yada yada. So, but there's still just no evidence of this transmissible particle, and that's important. But of course, I realize people get sick, and a lot of people got really sick during COVID, and I was never denying the sickness. It was the cause of the sickness which was in question. Yeah.
So when you're looking for proofs, a few of you have brought up is it the Vedic term neti?
Oh yeah, Alec and Mike talk about that quite a bit. Yeah, I haven't mentioned.
Yeah, oh, you haven't. Mark brought it up as well, and I was like, okay, this group is sympathetic to each other. It's not this, not that, in order to find out what it is. But there seems to be no claims made for what may replace it. So, is it your view that viruses simply don't exist because there isn't the proof, or is it just that the proof is potentially yet to come?